Chapter 3 The Strange Letter. Ugh, let's get out of here, Jean urged. Holding their breath, Louise and Jean ran into the corridor. Several students with rooms nearby, having heard the explosion, rushed out to see what had happened. Oh, what a dreadful smell, cried one of the freshmen. She was a small, pretty girl named Ruth Boland. Where did it come from? Louise raised her eyebrows in disgust. A skunk bomb. It's just inside our door. Eek, said Ruth. She retreated into her own room and closed the door. The Danas hurried back into their suite and opened every window. Then Jean scooped up the remains of the skunk bomb into an envelope, and they returned to the hall, shutting the door behind them. By this time, Doris and Evelyn had come up. What happened? Doris asked. When she was told, her eyes wandered down the corridor to a room shared by Letty Briggs and Ina Mason. Doris whispered, I'll bet Letty's guilty. Everyone knew that Letty disliked the Danas. She envied their reputation as amateur detectives, and often played tricks on the sisters, trying to discredit them. It's strange, said Jean, that neither Letty nor Ina came out to see what the commotion was. Let's try to find some proof, Louise suggested. Both sisters searched the hall between their room and Letty's. Suddenly, Louise spotted a red silk tassel on the floor. Triumphantly, she held it up. We all know this is from Letty's bathrobe, she said. Evelyn spoke up. And it wasn't there when we went to our rooms, because I'd have seen it. I lost my fountain pen and looked along here for it. There was no chance for further conversation, for at that moment Mrs. Crandall came marching down the corridor from the front stairway. The headmistress, a tall, severe-looking woman, had learned of the bomb incident and demanded to know the details. We're not sure of anything except that someone threw it into our study, Jean answered. Frowning, Mrs. Crandall strode to the suite, looked inside, then quickly shut the door again. I assume you were studying for your exams tomorrow, she said to the Danas. You'd better take your books in someone else's room until your suite is completely aired. Jean gave Mrs. Crandall the envelope with the fragments of the bomb in it, which the headmistress said she would dispose of outside the building. While Mrs. Crandall had been questioning Louise and Jean, the students who had gathered in the hall returned to their rooms. Ruth Boland peered out and beckoned the sisters to come in. I just remembered something, Ruth said. I don't like to tell tales, but I did overhear Letty say to Ina, The Danas make me sick with their good marks. I'll fix them so they won't be able to study. I've been so worried about the math exam, she added seriously, that I forgot all about it. Louise and Jean nodded at each other. This and the bathrobe tassel were good proof. They thanked Ruth and went back to the suite to gather books, papers, and pencils, which they took into Evelyn's room. Are you going to give the tassel back to Letty and accuse her of throwing the skunk bomb? Evelyn asked. Louise shook her head. One good turn deserves another, she said, grinning mischievously. Organizing her work on the far side of Evelyn's desk, Jean said, What should we do about Letty? Louise's eyes twinkled. Remember when we got Letty a date with 3 little boys and she thought a big handsome man was coming? How about a similar trick? Only this time no one will show up. Jean giggled. Perfect. Louise took a plain piece of paper and printed a note to Letty in bold letters, then signed it Jack Brownlee. Does it look mannish? She asked the others. Evelyn giggled. Yes, who's Jack Brownlee? Nobody, I made him up. Do you suppose Letty will fall for it? Evelyn asked. Of course, said Jean. She'll think he's some secret admirer. If I mail this now, Louise said, it should be picked up at 11 o'clock and delivered tomorrow. She hurried out, taking the invitation and the tassel. After the note was mailed, she slipped into the dining room and placed the silk tassel beside Letty's plate. Then the girls settled down to study. At 10 o'clock they were finished and returned to their room. The odor was gone. Louise and Jean slept soundly. At breakfast time, when they reached the dining room, Letty had already pocketed the tassel. When Louise and Jean walked past her, she didn't even look up to say good morning. During the day, Letty was forgotten as the Danas concentrated on their exams. Even the mystery of the wax queen did not enter their thoughts until they were dressing for dinner. Who was the queen, and what was so mysterious about her? It'll be fun sleuthing in New York, said Louise. There was a knock on their study door. Jean opened it. One of the underclassmen handed her a special delivery letter. "This just came," she said. The envelope bore no return address and had been mailed in Penfield. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Tearing open the letter addressed to her and Louise, Jean read the short note aloud. "Dear Mrs. Dana, I've heard you're good amateur sleuths. It is important that I locate Mr. Denver, the man in charge of the carnival prizes. Please, if you know where he is or can find out for me, I will be eternally grateful. Address the letter to General Delivery, New York, N.Y. Sincerely, Winifred Moffat." "How strange," Louise commented. "Jean, did you ever hear of Winifred Moffat?" "No." Jean paused. "Could this be another of Letty's jokes?" "I doubt it." Louise shook her head. "She wouldn't know about Mr. Denver." The girls recalled their suspicions of Denver. "Do you think Winifred Moffat could be the woman who tried to stop the drawing of the prizes?" Jean asked. "I've a hunch she was," Louise replied. The dinner bell rang and the sisters joined their friends on the way to the dining room. Letty was particularly dressed up and had a bright smile on her face. Louise and Jean were sure she was eagerly awaiting her date that evening. During the social hour after dinner, the Danas, together with Doris and Evelyn, made a point of watching Letty. As time went on, her cheerful face became gloomy. The girls overheard Ina say, "Don't be blue, Letty. I'm sure he'll be here any minute." But Ina's prediction did not come true. When the gong sounded for study hour, Letty, crestfallen, dawdled back to her room. "You know what?" Louise said as the Danas started for their suite. "I'm sorry I played that joke. Now she is upset and probably won't be able to study. But I think we can make it up to her." "How?" asked Jean. Louise offered to call Ken Scott at Walton Academy to see if he could fix Letty up with a blind date for the dance the next evening. Jean nodded. "Ken will understand. He'll pick some nice boy just right for Letty. And if he has a big family name, it'll be all the better. Letty loves to feel important." When Ken heard the request, he remarked, "I know just the one. Leave it to me. I'll have him call Letty in a few minutes." The next day, Letty announced smugly that she had a date with John Case, whose father was a very important judge. The Danas congratulated her and smiled to themselves. At 4 o'clock, the last exam was over and Starhurst corridors rang with whoops of joy and excited chatter. That evening, the school bus transported some of the girls to Walton Academy. Their dates greeted them with broad smiles and lovely corsages. Louise's friend, Ken Scott, was tall, blonde, and athletic. Jean's date was Chris Barton, a dark-haired boy with laughing eyes. He was full of fun and always won the comic roles in school plays. Winking at the sisters, Ken and Chris pointed to another couple. A lanky boy with horn-rimmed glasses was introducing himself to Letty. "You're Miss Briggs?" Letty snickered. "Yes, I am. Oh, how did you hear about me? It was simply marvelous of you to invite me." Quickly slipping her arm through his, she accompanied the spindle-legged boy inside. When the dance was over, the girls thanked Ken and Chris for a wonderful time and invited them to visit Starhurst a month later. As the girls boarded the school bus, Chris grinned broadly. "Don't be surprised if we turn up in New York City while you're there," he said. "That'd be great," Jean replied. In the morning, the Danas took an early flight out of Penfield Airport. Before long, the sleek silver plane was setting down at LaGuardia Airport. At the exit, Aunt Harriet and Uncle Ned were eagerly awaiting for their nieces. "It's so good to see you, my dears," said Miss Dana, hugging them tightly. The girls complimented her on her attractive suit and perky hat. "My new spring outfit," she told them. Uncle Ned was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a commanding air and a twinkle in his eyes. "Glad you made it," he said, kissing Louise first, then Jean. "How was the trip, my hearties?" "Just great. We're so happy to see you again," Louise said. Jean added, "And we just can't wait to hear all about the Wax Queen." The Danas took a taxi to Cynthia Carson's apartment building, an old-fashioned, elegant one with a pleasant doorman. Uncle Ned led them to the self-service elevator and pushed the button for the 5th floor. "Cynthia has apartment 53, the captain told them. Louise and Jean had not seen their cousin for several years, but found she had changed very little. She was a lively, congenial widow of 50. "I'm so thrilled you could come," she said. "Let me show you to your rooms first, and then we'll have lunch. You girls must be hungry after your trip." Jean laughed. "How did you guess?" A few minutes later, she and Louise joined Mrs. Carson in the cheerfully decorated kitchen. It had been modernized somewhat, but like many old-fashioned apartments, had a fire escape outside one of the windows. The girls helped carry the delicious meal of chicken in a casserole, potato puffs, and tossed salad into the dining room. When everyone was seated and served, Jean said, "Please, Cousin Cynthia, tell us all about the wax queen." Mrs. Carson smiled. "Actually, there are two of them, both mysterious. One is a real woman, the other is a very old wax bust of Queen Victoria. It's a priceless piece." "And it has disappeared," put in Jean impetuously. "Just the opposite," replied her cousin. "It has suddenly and mysteriously appeared in a shop downtown. I'll take you girls there tomorrow." "Tell us more," Louise begged. "Later," her cousin said firmly. "Then we can talk it over quietly. Now I want to catch up on all the news." When lunch was over, Mrs. Carson said, "I've planned something for this afternoon, and I hope you don't mind. A friend sold me several chances on a new car. The drawing is being held at a bazaar in New Jersey hotel, and I thought you would enjoy the trip." Car, bazaar, lucky number drawing. Would Mr. Denver be in charge? Louise and Jean were excited at the prospect. Maybe they could find out more about the mysterious man. While the sisters helped clear the table and tidy the kitchen, Aunt Harriet decided to mail a letter and make a purchase in a nearby drugstore. 15 minutes later, as the others were gathering in the living room, there came a loud scream just outside the door. "Help!" a woman's voice cried. Louise jumped from her chair. "That's Aunt Harriet!" she exclaimed. End of chapter 3.